All right, we're back. Heads or Tails podcast. I got my guy Branden Bordeaux, the world middleweight world champion, power slap. Right? Thanks for jumping on here, man.
Of course, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. West Michigan guy. I thought it would be great to jump on. You know, this podcast is all around both the individual mindset and performance, but also we like to talk about flipping the coin on its side or on its head, and flipping it to the tail side and talk about program and stuff like that. But I really just want to dive into mindset. Just hear from you, man. One, congrats on the fight, dude.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, it's been a hell of a journey so far. You know what I mean? I came from, a big wrestling school in high school, and then I got into MMA after that. And I was doing pretty successful. I was 5-0 in MMA. Well, I took a little bit of a break because we ended up started having kids.
Yeah.
And it was time to grow up and get a real job. I was just in my early 20s.
Yeah.
So I got a real job and I took a few years off. And after a few years, I was like, you know what? I think it's time. Like, I still have goals, dreams, aspirations, things that I wanted to achieve. I'm a very goal-driven person.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to come back for this. I had let myself get out of shape. You know what I mean? I wasn't in, good shape or anything like that. I was eating like shit all the time.
Right.
And so I started dialing back into things, started getting back in the gym, started working out, started doing everything right. I was getting in good shape and ended up breaking my back at work.
Dang.
So once I broke my back, then I had to have back surgery. So when I had my back fused together, I got my L5, S1 fused together. So right above your tailbone, they had to go in between my discs, take all that cushion stuff out of there. They put a plastic spacer in between in between my discs. I got 2 screws that go up and 2 screws that go down. So once that happened, the MMA dream was over with. You know what I mean? Because it's so hard on your body. It's total body stuff, and there's so many things that my body is limited to now because of that surgery, because of that, breaking my back like I did.
And kids probably gave you perspective too on that.
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely, yeah, definitely. And so once I was actually laying around recovering from surgery, is when Dana White and the UFC started Power Slap.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely crazy because, like, Lane, my son, he sat there and watched the whole first season with me. I mean, we watched every episode of it.
Yeah.
And I'm laying there thinking, you're like, you know what? This might be something that I could possibly do with my my back situation and still work for Dana, still be around all the UFC stuff, you know what I mean? Be around that whole life.
Yeah.
That was kind of my goal, you know what I mean, was to go towards all of that. And once the back surgery and everything stuff happened, I thought those goals were going to be ripped away. And I think it was just a sign, you know what I mean, when I was laying there recovering from that.
Yeah.
When Power Slap started, and that was 3 years ago at the end of March.
Yeah.
And now here I am sitting as a world champion of Power Slap. So it's crazy how things happen and how things work. And you know what I mean? It's been a wild journey already, and it's really still early in the beginning of it.
Isn't that wild too?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think so often people have those dreams in the first hiccup. They're like, yeah, I'm just throwing it out the window. You know what I mean? Like you had a major event that most people would say, man, the dream's just not there.
They just give up.
Right?
And that's what I kind of thought was going to happen with myself. You know what I mean? Laying there recovering from that surgery, going through everything that I was going through so much, not just physically, but mentally.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? You go from being able to do anything and everything, you know what I mean? Like just your normal everyday household stuff.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you have the surgery and you can't do nothing.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm stuck laying in bed all day, every day.
Right.
I was in this turtle shell brace that had my legs locked out. I was in that brace, I think, for like 14 weeks.
Jeez.
I pretty much had to lay flat on my back all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there was a lot of things. I think I was mentally tested a lot.
Dude,
you know what I mean? Where I almost felt like I was going to break because, you're just laying in a bed all day, every day, just dealing with pain, just dealing with the same thing. And then you're dealing with all these thoughts that are coming through your head. You know what I mean? And like I said, I didn't think, and I've said it in some of my other interviews, I didn't think I would do anything physically ever again in my life.
Wow.
Like normal walk around, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like I didn't think I would do. I didn't think I'd ever be in the gym again.
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd ever be lifting weights again.
Yep.
I didn't think I'd ever be competing again.
Yeah. So you're playing on house money right now.
Yeah.
You're playing on house
money.
money.
You know what I mean? I'm not even supposed to be here. You know what I mean? So that's why I really tell myself, you know what I mean, to be thankful and be humble for everything that I've gotten to do, everything that I get to do, and all the opportunities that come my way. You know what I mean? Because I also know how fast those things can be taken away and how fast they can be gone as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that keeps you humble, keeps you grounded, things like that.
For sure. What drew you? So many people, like I remember growing up with the MMA, people doing, and naive and not realizing you're like, oh, I could do that. I could do that. Like what drew you to that? 5-0 in that. Like what drew you to that and what got you into that?
I think it was just like I grew up wrestling my whole life
okay.
pretty much. You know what I mean? I started wrestling probably like 8, 10 years old, somewhere in there. I think it was kind of coming from that background. You know what I mean? And I've always been in sports. You know, I played all sports when I was
Yep.
little. You know, as I got older and as I got into high school, my main sports were football and wrestling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And wrestling's a very different sport.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you've wrestled and you've been through it, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There is a, you know, it's. I heard a saying the other day. It's you got to get comfortable. Wrestlers get comfortable being uncomfortable and
Dude.
putting themselves in uncomfortable situations. The
Yeah.
practices, the cutting weight.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's where I believe a lot of my mind. I know actually, I don't believe. I know
Yeah.
for a fact a lot of my mindset stuff that I have now 100% came from wrestling
I bet.
and
Yeah.
came from the school that I was at, and not just the school, but the individuals that I was around. You know, I seen these guys competing at a very high levels, you know, winning state titles every year,
Right.
you know, in and out of the state finals every year.
Yeah.
So I watched these guys and I was like, I want to do what they're doing. I want, you know what I mean? I'm an extremely competitive person.
Yeah.
So I seen these guys winning and I seen what they were doing and I wanted to be part of that.
Yeah.
So I put myself right in the middle of all of it, you know, and like I said, I think that helped with a lot of my mindset and everything like that. So coming from a sport like wrestling, and then when I graduated, I went right into coaching.
Yep.
But I knew, you know what I mean, I always followed the UFC and MMA and stuff like that. So I knew if I wasn't going to have like a long college wrestling career, that I wanted to go into MMA, and that's exactly what I did. As I went into it, and yeah, I was having a good career and everything. And like I said, I had to take some time off on that back surgery and stuff.
Yeah.
So
That's wild, man. And I never wrestled, but I got into jujitsu and have been doing that.
Yep.
And like totally, yeah. I mean, you think you're like, oh yeah, whatever, and then you go in there and you get like one wrong move, you don't even realize it. You're twisted up and locked up, and like you get a knee to the face, and you're like, oh, where did that come from? And then you're like, all right, take a deep breath. Now I'm going back at it again. And so you have to have this like, it's hard to describe, but you just have to be sharp, and you have to be willing to like, as soon as you're in that spot, defeat or not, it's like boom, let it go, next thing. Because it's the only thing that matters is what's right in front of you, and it teaches you that really, really fast.
Yep. Yeah, it sure does. And that's, you know what I mean? That's one of the biggest things about wrestling. You know what I mean? Is it teaches you so many life lessons.
Yeah.
And you don't even realize it as a kid, but you know what I mean? Now as an adult looking back, I'm like, holy shit, you know what I mean? And the things that wrestling has taught me that I use in my everyday life is absolutely crazy. You know what I mean? And now that all transforms into the stuff I'm doing now. You know what I mean? With whether it's, you know, competing in front of crowds or competing in, you know, in big venues, because we did that as well in wrestling. You know what I mean? It's just the embrace the grind that I came from in wrestling. You know, it's crazy. You got these guys who, you know, they're cutting weight, but then, you know, they're putting themselves through these practices, you know, they're grinding, you know what I mean? And it's a grind. You're in there battling, you know what I mean? It isn't something that's just, you know, it's not easy. It's not physically easy. It's not mentally easy, you know, and it teaches you a lot of things. And, you know, I'm very appreciative, you know, for the lessons that I learned and coming from a wrestling background like I did.
And I think even the moment to moment of you're not feeling it, you're not wanting, like, whatever, I'm tired, whatever that is, wrestling forces you to, like, you got to put that to the side and just do the dang thing.
Got to pull
and
it
then,
out of you.
Yeah, and then you get to the other side and you go, oh, man, I was ready to not do the thing, but I did it anyways. Okay, that feeling really doesn't matter in that moment.
Yep. And now I know I can do it.
Right, 100%.
You know what I mean? It pushes you to those things where, you know, yeah, your mind's sitting here, your mindset, you're trying to tell you like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, or you're having doubts or whatever it is. But then when you go and you do the things that your mind was doubting, and you prove to yourself that you can do those things, well, now you put that in your head. Oh, wait, you know what I mean? Now I know in the next situation, when I get into the next situation where my mind is, you know what I mean, is contemplating whatever's going on, you know what I mean? I know I can get through it because I've been through it in other situations.
Yeah,
you know,
man.
and I've done that with, you know, many different things in my life. You know what I mean? I'm like, you know what I mean? I'll get into a situation. I've been like, you know, in my head, I've been in similar things like this. I know what to do. I know how to handle myself, you know, whether it's a practice, whether it's life, whatever it is. Okay, this might suck for a few minutes or whatever it is, but I know that things get better.
Right.
You know what I mean? They will get better.
The feeling's temporary.
Exactly.
Yeah,
The feeling's
yeah,
temporary.
yep.
Just keep pushing through and things will get better. So
Yeah. And I think that so often we don't give ourselves the chance to keep going. And people are like, man, I don't have confidence. You know, and so many people think that it's like this undying belief. And there's absolutely time where you have that undying belief. I'm sure you've had times where you're like, oh, there's not a doubt in my mind. But there's probably been more times even where it's like, oh, maybe what if? And when you still wake up, you still do the dang thing, you still go and train, you still do that, then you're like, even with that thought, I got up and did the thing.
Yep, I got past it.
Yeah. And that's what really builds the confidence.
Yeah, it's confidence is a huge thing.
Yeah.
I mean, confidence in your mindset. I firmly believe, and I've said it so many times, especially where I'm at in life now. If I had the confidence and I had the mindset that I do now, what I mean, I would have been a 4-time undefeated state champion in wrestling in high school. What I mean, just because I know, what I mean, I know the difference for myself back then to now. What I mean, and a lot of it, I firmly believe 90% of it was mindset.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's the mindset in games. You know what I mean? Or anything in life, and even just in your everyday life, your mindset is so huge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you wake up in a bad mood or in a bad mindset, you know what I mean, and you allow yourself to stay there, well, now your whole day is going to be ruined, right? So, you know what I mean? If you're in a bad mindset, it's very important to be able to learn or teach yourself how to get out of those mindsets or get past those situations that you're in. You know what I mean? And I think that's where, those hard times in wrestling, taught you to get past things. So when you're dealing with things mentally, like, okay, I can get past these things.
Yep.
And then once you've done it a couple times, then you really know and you install more confidence in yourself that I know that I can get past these things. I know how to work through them.
Yep.
I mean, it's so important in life to go through situations to learn and to teach yourself.
And it's the hub, man. It's at the end of the day, the brain, the mind is the hub of any human endeavor in all performance. And there is that deep connection between your body and mind. And what we talk about is like the physiology of that, And even as you described the, being in that brace, like one of the big skills is when you do have that, you move, you do something like, and many people, instead of moving, they eat.
Yep.
And then they wonder why like that. It's like, well, because when you eat, it shifts your physiology, right? And then you make that the habit, and that ends up being a bad habit.
And then you're eating all the time.
Yeah, but you have to shift that physiology to help shift your mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you have to, basically what you're saying is when you're laying there and your mind's you got to put yourself in a different situation or a different mindset while you're there. You have to teach yourself those things. And I feel like, you know what I mean, there's a lot of people out there that don't know how to get themselves out of their situation, or they let their mind win.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think maybe that's a thing with me that I, digging into a little bit deeper. Like I said earlier, I'm so competitive.
Yeah.
So maybe when it comes to my mindset stuff is I'm going against myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I look at it as, when those times come up, now my mind is competing against itself.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I always want to win.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do whatever I got to do to beat those bad thoughts in my mind. So I've been able to teach myself to get through things. And there's things that you deal with every day.
100%.
Every single day. You know what I mean? There's situations where, you could be on top of the world and you'd be like, man, I woke up today, I just don't feel right. I don't want to go to the gym, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to, you just feel, you got this feeling, but you got to tell yourself and you got to pull yourself out of those situations. You got to make yourself go and do it. I've had days, many days where I didn't want to go to the gym, or I didn't want to work out, or I didn't want to do this. I'm just like, my body isn't feeling it. My mind isn't feeling it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'll sit there and fight with yourself in your head. I do a lot of self-talk.
Yep, I do.
So I think I'll sit there and fight with myself in my head. You know what I mean? I'm like, sometimes I call it my inner bitch voice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's just trying to be like, I don't know if I want to today. Or I don't, and it's like, no, you're going to make yourself. You're going to make yourself go and do it. Because then once you go and do it, I can tell you what, like I said, I've had this many times. And then I go and do it, or I go to the gym, I get my workout in.
You always feel better.
And you feel so much better. The car drive home, whatever it is, I'm like, I just take a sigh of relief. I walk out of the doors of the gym, whatever it is, I'm like, I feel so much better.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I went and did that.
Yep.
Well, now I've just taught myself in my mind, that I can get past that situation that I woke up in the morning where, I just ain't feeling it today, or I'm too sore, or, you know what I mean? Well, I got past it. I proved to myself and I proved to my mind that I can get past it. You know what I mean? Now I know how it feels to be on the other side of it.
Yep.
So now when I get in any other situations in life, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
You just got to get through it.
And that's why it's so important to have routines. We talk about pre-decisions.
Yep.
You have to have the pre-decisions that no matter the feeling, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
And so there is no choice. When that inner dialogue starts, you go, nope, I'm going to put you in your place because the decision was already made.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And it allows you to keep stacking those wins quicker and keeping the momentum going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I just think it's, like I said, you can get in your head so bad. And especially when it comes to sports or anything like that, I've seen people completely, unwind mentally.
Yeah.
Or you've got these people who who are extremely good in practice. You know, I mean, I've seen it in wrestling, I've seen it in football, who are extremely good in practice, but the minute they get out in front of a crowd or they get out under bright lights or they get into a situation where there's a little bit of pressure, they just fold, you know, because they don't know how to handle it mentally. And that's where I believe, you know, obviously, you know, the physical aspect of sports is huge, but I firmly believe that the mental aspect in anything in life is far superior to all of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you don't have the right mindset or you don't have it up here, you're not going to be able to succeed in the right ways. You're going to let that inner bitch voice, you know what I mean, control what you're doing, and you can't. You have to control that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, as people are listening, it's one of those things too of, I'm sure some people are like, well, you're a world champion, it's easy. But what if people don't know, like in December, you had your first loss.
Yeah.
And so like you faced that and you probably battled, like you're speaking from experience, I'm sure, where you battled that more than once from December to March.
Yep.
And then you end up winning the world championship, right? Like talk us through that. Like you end up, that happens. Like what's like, you're coming off of that and you're going, all right, how do I lock back in?
Yeah, well, in my situation, you know, it's kind of even worse because if you have a loss where it's, you know, a clear-cut loss, you know, it's never easy. It's never losing is never easy. But I would sit here and say a clear-cut loss instead of dealing with the situation that I had to deal
100%.
with. You know, I mean, I firmly believe I was winning that match. I was doing, you know, I was doing a number on him for sure. He caught me with it, you know, a decent shot. It was the first time I've ever been dropped in my career. I hit my butt and I come up to my feet probably a little too fast, but I was up to my feet within like 4 seconds. You know, and I remember I looked right at the ref, looked him right in the eye, gave him a thumbs up. I even looked over at one of the catchers. Like I vividly remember all of this. And he was actually still counting at like 6, 7, and he told me to walk towards him. And he could have counted a little bit longer because I think it's supposed to be an automatic 8 count. So anyways, he had me walk towards him, and when I walked towards him, my left foot, my first step barely caught the mat. It caught the mat a little bit, and I did just a little bit of a sidestep, just literally the subtlest little sidestep. And the ref goes to wave it off, and you could tell even when he went to wave it off, like normally they'll, you know, wave their hands a lot. Well, he kind of did like a half. And you can see like my eyes, like when you're really messed up or you really are rocked, like your eyes are all over the place. But you can watch my eyes follow his hands, and I looked right back at him, and I said, "What the?"
Right, you were
like,
surprised.
Yeah, I was completely surprised that he stopped it because, you know, as I knew, as well as everybody else who was watching, millions of people that were watching, and you know the guy I was going against himself knew. One more shot and he was done. And I, you know what I mean? I was world champion in December. So, you know what I mean? That being stopped the way it was, you know, I think it just, you know, it gave me a whole nother level of motivation.
Sure.
It is really what it was. And, you know,
like that chip on your shoulder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
you know
I
what I mean? Because
that,
I also knew it gave me that, and it also gave me a lot of confidence. You know what I mean? Because I knew in my head, like what I could do, or you think, you know what you could do, or you coming into that match with confidence. You know, credit to Isaiah leading into that December match is he had a hell of a year last year. He ran right through the middleweight division without a problem. He ran through, like, he was the number 2 guy last June, knocked him out. That was the first time that guy's ever been knocked out. Got the title shot off that, and then ended up knocking out the champion, who was the champion for a couple years. You know what I mean? So he was riding high, and he was coming into that match and 3-0 on the year, had been having, you know, a huge year, and so for me to go in there and do what I was doing to him, you know what I mean, that also gave me confidence because nobody was able to rock him. Nobody was able to, you know what I mean, hardly take any shots from him. You know what I mean? And my first shot rocked him really bad. My second shot put him down. And you know what I mean? There's quite question there that, you know, I have some video clips that he was still on a knee at 10. You know what I mean? The count was a little slow and stuff like that. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know what I mean, the ref did end up waving, you know, waved it off in his favor too. So, you know, I had to go back to, I don't want to say go back to the drawing board because I knew what
there's evidence there.
Yeah,
that, hey, I'm in it.
That I knew, you know what I mean, that I was right there, you know what I mean? And I carried myself into that match knowing, but you don't know until you know. And, you know, so, you know, that night of leaving that match, there was, you know, just a whole nother level of motivation, you know, and I went home and I had a trainer get a hold of me and he said, you know, hey, I know that you're right there. He goes, I just feel like a couple things and I could really help you push you over that, you know, that hill and, you know, help you become world champion. So, you know, the match was December 6th, Friday, December 6th. I flew home December 7th, Saturday, December 7th, Monday, December 9th. I was right back in the gym. So, you know, took one day when I got home, I got right back in the gym, You know what I mean? And we were grinding harder, hard as could be for 3 months, pretty much every day. And, I'm in the gym 4 or 5 days a week. And then take my rest days, because your rest days your rest days are just as important, if not more important, than the workout days themselves.
We talk about you need to have the grit to recover.
Yep, you have to. Absolutely have to. You can run your body down. You got to give your body time to come back. Yeah. So even like on my rest days, though, there's still things that I'm doing. I'm studying film. Yeah. I'm doing hand workouts. I have these jazzercise that I chew on for my jaw and stuff like that. So even though it's a quote unquote rest day, there's still things that you can be doing on those rest days. You know what I mean?
Active.
Active rest days. So, coming out of that match December 6th, the way that things have ended, like it put a chip on my shoulder. I was even more confident after that match, the way things ended, the way things were going. So, like I said, we went back to work, and, like I said, I was grinding probably harder than ever. And I feel like I came into, this last match probably in some of the best shape that I've ever been in my life. I know Michael Bisbing made a couple comments on the broadcast, and he made a couple comments to me in person. I had weighed in and walked off the scale, and he's like, "Man, you look like you're in good shape." And I was like, I knew I was in great shape. I knew the work that I had put in, and that was another reason why I had the confidence that I had going into it, was because I knew the work that I had put in.
Right.
You know what I mean? And there's no substitution for hard work. When you work hard at something and you set your mind to it, you can 100% achieve those things that you're chasing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you have to put in the work.
Absolutely.
You can't have these goals and be, just expect those goals to show up.
Yeah.
You have to work towards those goals, and you have to work towards them every day.
Yep.
I mean, whether it's physically. Consistency is the biggest thing, you know what I mean? So whether it's, physically or mentally, or, both every day, you're constantly working on those things.
And you become that person.
Yep.
Like the person that you have vision for, the dreams that you have through the work and consistently showing up, no matter what, rain, shine, feel, whatever, you keep doing that. And then you wake up and you're like, I'm the guy.
Yep.
Like for you, it's like, now I got the belt.
Yep.
Like I'm him.
I did it. I mean? The hard work paid off to chase that goal. You know what I mean? That was one of the first goals on the list. Like I said earlier, I'm a very goal oriented person. So, and I think that goes for everything in life. If you don't have goals, or you don't have things that you're working for, then, what are you doing?
Right.
You always got to, I mean, it can be the littlest things. It doesn't have to be in sports or whatever, you know what I mean? It could be in everyday life, or, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to get this done today. You know what I mean? I'm going to get these chores done, or I'm going to get this work done. You know what I mean? You can't tell me that you don't do those things, and after you get those things done and accomplished, that you don't feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
I know for a fact you do. Even if it's just the littlest thing. I get out of bed in the morning, I'm tired, but I know that, X, Y, and Z have to be done. While I get X, Y, and Z done, you're kind of like, now I feel good. I'm kind of proud of myself.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And like I was just saying earlier, those, dragging yourself out of bed or dragging yourself to the gym and everything, it's the same thing when you get those workouts done, or you get that stuff done. You're like, man, I feel good. You know what I mean? And it gives you that confidence in yourself to be able to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I heard you say too is like, you had a choice in where you put your focus from that match, right? You could have said, like, you could have taken the route of like, it's totally unfair, I got robbed, right? And just sat in that and took no action.
Yep.
And so many people do that, right?
Oh yeah.
You could have done, well, it was the first time I got put in my butt.
So I felt bad for myself.
Right, and felt bad for like, oh, he put me on my butt. I don't know if I can do it, right? Because one data point is that you got put on your butt, right? And you could have sat in that, and then not put in the work. But instead, you were like, look, I was in it. I was winning it. I have evidence. Look at this thing. I was there, right? And it was like, and what I'm hearing is like, yeah, these other things happened, but what I'm going to focus on is these things, because that brings my best and keeps fueling me to bring my best moving forward.
100%. You're exactly right. And that's the mindset that I had, coming out of it. And I feel like, that's why I had the success that I had, this last time around. And, like you said, I could have just sat in it. I could have sulked in it. I could have, sat there and felt bad for myself, or, oh, boo-hoo me, you know what I mean? Yeah, no, there was definitely things that I said on social media where, I firmly believe that was stopped early. Sure. I was robbed. I was completely robbed of that match. I firmly believe, and there's lots of other people out there that believe that I whooped his ass in December, and I turned around and whooped his ass again in March. You know what I mean? So realistically, it's 2-0. It ain't 1-1. It's 2-0.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But like you said, I could have sat there, sulked in it, felt bad for myself, but that wasn't it at all. It was, for myself, it picked up the motivation even more.
Right.
You know what I mean? And myself, like I said, being a very goal-oriented person, You know what I mean? I was already driven. And what that did was, drove me even more and gave me even more confidence. And I
Octane
had,
fuel. Let's go.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I had said on social media a couple different times, like, you know what I mean? That whole situation, like, you gave more motivation to the wrong person.
Sure.
Because I have, when I got into this, and that's another thing, when I get into things, I'm not just in them to participate, or
Right.
you know what I
You
mean, or just,
embody it.
right.
Yeah,
I'm not in, I'm not in things to be part of it. I was totally there to take over, and that's what I said coming into Power Slap. You know what I mean? If I'm going to get into this, I want to be the best of the world at what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And the first goal was, to get to the world title.
Yep.
And you got to have the right mindset and the right work ethic in order to put yourselves in those situations. And and I've said yes to every opportunity that's popped up. You know what I mean? Like I said, the first one was also on 17 days notice.
Right.
You know what I mean? They called us on 17 days notice, like, hey, we had a title fight drop out. We need you guys to jump in. That's another reason why it's very important to stay ready, so you don't have to get ready. I mean, I know of other people who they don't do anything until they get a phone call saying, like, hey, you got a match. Well, I mean, they could call you like I just said, on 17 days notice, or they could give you 8 weeks notice. You don't know when exactly that they're going to call. So your best bet is just to stay ready all the time. No, you don't have to be grinding as hard as what you'd be like, you know what I mean, in camp, in a camp, exactly, So, but it is very important to, keep yourself going, keep yourself moving, keep your body in good shape. If you take all these weeks off, or even if you take a couple of days off and then you get back in the gym, you're gonna feel it. You feel it for sure. Yeah, you definitely feel it. I was just on vacation for a week, and I did workouts, like, at home workouts. We were doing push-ups and band stuff, and I had a small set of dumbbells, and I was still doing some of my neck stuff, but I wasn't doing the same things, or as heavy, or or as intense as what I am when I'm in the gym. And now I've been home for a couple days, and I hit Monday and I hit Tuesday hard. I can feel it right now. I'm sore. I'm nice and sore.
Yep.
So but I also use those types of things as motivation as well. It's like, yeah, I got a good workout in. I can feel myself.
That familiar feeling. Welcome back.
Welcome back. You know what I mean? Your body is, to me, it's when you feel those, your body is building.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's getting stronger. You know what I mean? I tore those muscles down. That's why it's nice. Like, today's my recovery day.
Yeah.
So it's my rest day. So I'm just giving my body, all day to rest, recover, come back. You know what I mean? And that's another thing we talk about with my trainers. You don't want to annihilate your body.
For sure.
When you're going into these workouts and stuff, it's important to get your body a good workout, but you don't want to annihilate your body and then turn around and do that every day, like we were talking about earlier. Giving your body time to rest and recover is so huge.
Yeah,
that's when your body is growing. That's when your muscles are growing. That's when you're getting stronger, is when you're recovering or when you're sleeping.
Yep.
I've found out that the sleep is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it, you might not be able to, but if you can get 8, 10, 11, 12 hours of sleep, like, your body, your body's going to be very recovered.
For sure.
You know what I mean? And it does a lot. The studies and the stuff that I've heard, is that your body is building muscle and it's recovering everything while you sleep. So
there's tons of things you can do for recovery, but the greatest thing is sleep.
Yeah.
The greatest thing is sleep.
Yeah. There's also, I do like some red bed therapy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's other little things, you know what I mean, that I like to do personally.
Yeah.
A cold plunge. I like to do cold plunging and stuff in the summer. Yeah. That's huge. That's another thing, with mindset, cold plunging. Cold plunge, you have to get past that.
Yeah.
Especially, I don't do it in the winter, and this is probably a mindset block for myself even.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I hate the cold.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I can't see myself going out when it's 0 degrees in Michigan and getting into 20 or 30 degree water.
My wife has videos of me like hammering away at mine.
Yeah, getting in there. Oh man, it's terrible. But it teaches you so much mentally. You know what I mean? Like, I'll do it through the spring, summer, fall, and I probably should, keep doing it through the winter. Like I said, the mindset thing. But you know what I mean? As you're getting ready to jump in that, 30, 40 degree water, whatever it is, your mind's sitting there telling you, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to freeze.
It's the pre-decision. I already made the decision, man.
Yep.
And the other piece too, and this is what I talk to athletes all the time, is like, you can't mimic. And for you there's no way you can mimic that fight.
Yep.
You can't simulate that. You can visualize it. You can do all those things. And those are all critical things. You have to train for it. You can't mimic that scenario.
Right.
And so if it's the closest you can get to that, in the physiology and both your mind too, and that for me at least, that's what it is, man.
Yep.
You get in that thing and it's like, and you have to breathe through it and you have to calm yourself down and you have to bring your focus to one thing and not let it go. Like, that's what it is.
You can't let your mind unwind.
You can't.
So it's teaching you in those, in that situation when you're in that cold water, you know what I mean, and you're having to, you know, weave your mind around what's trying to go on. It also teaches you, in any other situation in life or anything you're dealing with or in a sport or whatever, when you get into a situation where your mind wants to try to take control, now you know how to control your mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's teaching you those things. When you touch that cold water, you know what I mean? Like you said, your breath just, you got to slow your breathing down. You got to concentrate on something. You know what I mean? You have to bring yourself back. You have to control your mind and you have to control your body. And I really think that those things, it's teaching you, and like I said, when you get into any other situations, now okay, I've been doing this cold plunging stuff. I've been able to get control of my mind and all of that, so I should be able to get control of my mind in these other situations too.
Yeah. How much do you train that, like getting hit, right? So it's interesting because in what you do, like in anything else, you're not just going to stand there exposed, but you stand there exposed. So you're fighting your every reaction to go protect myself, right? And you're just sitting there and going, and it's funny because Rocco, my youngest, like after watching you and you coach him in football, he freaking loves you. And he's like, let's play power slap, and even he's 7, 8 years old. And I'll stand there and he'll go to do it. And I'm like, no, hold on.
Your natural instinct is to move. So it's so hard because you have to train a lot of your mind. You know what I mean? You have to train your mind into not moving like that. And one of the biggest things is, especially in this sport, if you do move or if you flinch, well, now you're going to get hit again. So one of the biggest things is, you put that in your head that, okay, if I move or if I flinch, well, they're going to get another shot on me. You know what I mean? And if that first one even rocks you just a little bit, and then they get to follow up,
get a second chance.
Your chances are, you know what I mean, you're going to be done. You know what I mean? Especially if you're going against somebody who's got good accuracy, good power. You know what I mean? If they can hit you in the same spot twice, especially right on the button, chances are you're going to get put out. So, the best thing you can do is just hold still. And to the physical part of it, we've kind of learned, there's still, coming up with ways to train and do things with, with this still being so early. But we take like a pool noodle. And you cut it down just, a couple feet long, and you sit there and practice with your hands behind your back, and then you'll have somebody take that pool noodle, and they'll just hit you in the face with that pool noodle. And now, obviously, you don't want to take any more unnecessary damage to the head.
Yeah, minimum dose. That's
exactly. So you're not going to sit here and, take unnecessary slaps to the face. You know what I mean? Because that's just doing damage to the head. So the best thing that we found is using that pool noodle where it's not rocking your head or anything like that, but yet you're training your instincts, to not flinch.
Right.
So that's kind of the best way that we've, come up with those things. But then again, now it's also a mindset thing too, that you have to go up there, you know what I mean? And you also know like what can happen to you up there, you know what I mean? You hundreds of millions of people watching, you know what I mean? Or if you get, you get knocked out,
it's exposing
virally. Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, we've had videos that have done 2, 3, 4, 500 million views.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it's very important to keep yourself in check and keep yourself, you know what I mean? I've talked about this with some of the other power slap guys too, and I firmly believe that this stuff is 90 to 95% mental.
Sure.
Because the minute you let yourself unwind and then you go out there like that, it's game over.
For sure.
So
I couldn't imagine,
there's things where, and I really noticed this because I went on a reality TV show. The reality TV show is kind of how I got started in power slap.
Okay.
Well, when I was on that reality TV show, when you go out to fight, there's no crowd. But Dana White's sitting out there, all the big wigs at Power Slap. Yeah, him and his buddies, you know what I mean, are out there. And so there's pressure, you know what I mean? And when you're back there in that locker room, you got to keep control of your mind because, one, your mind could start going to, okay, well, I got to go out and compete in front of Dana, this, that, and everything else. There's cameras and stuff everywhere, right? Like I said, what can happen to you when you go out there. You can get knocked out, you know what I mean? Anything. You could become a meme. Hundreds of millions of people are going to see this. Excuse me. So it's extremely important to keep yourself in mental check before you ever even go out there.
Yeah.
Because like I said, if you let yourself unwind in, back in the locker room where you're having any negative thoughts or anything, when you go out there, it's going to play a huge factor in your performance.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And I've seen it
it
firsthand with people. You know what I mean? And that's where I've credited, like I said, I've really seen it when I was on the reality show, my first couple matches. And, I really sat down and thought like, hey, you know what I mean? Like, the situations that I've been through with wrestling, you know what I mean? Or my back surgery situation and stuff, they've all groomed me into, who I am today and to be able to handle these higher pressure situations.
Yeah, you have the capacity that when the pressure is on, decide where you put your focus and
Yep.
attention.
Yep.
And that's, yeah, man.
It's
I see
controlling
it.
the mind because you can let your mind wander
Yeah.
off to other places.
And then you're
and you gotta
wasting
keep it
energy.
Yep.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, does Dana White matter in that moment? No, man. Do the cameras matter in the moment? No. Does the meme matter in that moment? No. Go out and execute.
Yep.
That's what matters in the
That's what
moment.
matters in the
And
moment.
it takes care of every other piece if you
Yep.
do that.
Yep. Exactly. You know what I mean? If you let yourself, your mind wander to these bad places and then you go out there with that, well then, you know what I mean, chances are those bad things are gonna, gonna be what ends up happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if you can keep yourself in check and you can say, okay, no, I know I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna go out there with this confidence, or you know what I mean? Like he had won so how we dictate who goes first, they flip a coin.
Okay.
You're red corner, blue corner, right? So he had won the toss this last time, so I knew going into this last match, you know what I mean, that I was gonna have to get hit first.
Yep.
I think I knew like a week and a half before the match, something like
Okay.
that. You know what I mean? So you have to prepare yourself to be able to, you know what I mean, especially coming from the December match, you know what I mean? Because the last time that he had hit me, you know what I mean, he actually knocked me down and vice versa, you know what I mean? Same thing. So you have to be able to navigate your mind, especially when the coin toss results come out. And then I see, you know what I mean, he's won the toss. Well, I instantly in my head, like, I have confidence in my chin.
Right.
I know what I can do. I know who I am. I know what I've already done.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So to me, it was, okay, that's fine. Let him win the toss. I'm going to eat that first shot, and I'm going to put him out on one.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I spoke that into existence. I had been saying that. You know, I actually, a couple months leading up into it, I kind of knew that he was going to win the toss. I had won the last one. You know what I mean? They don't really flip these coins in front of us anymore.
Sure,
So we all kind of have our opinions.
Theories
on,
on
yeah,
it.
yeah, opinions on what, you know what I mean, really happens. But so I kind of figured with me winning the toss in the first one that he was obviously going to get the second one.
Yeah.
So, going into that, I just had to have the confidence, you know what I mean, that I knew I had a good chin. You know, I firmly believe that I got dropped in that first match because of my own mistakes. So I feel like I, went and corrected those mistakes. And, you know what I mean? Like I said, I spoke it into existence. And that's another huge thing that I firmly believe in is manifesting, visualization. You know what I mean? I've been manifesting winning this title since I came into it. You know what I mean? And I will literally do things where I close my eyes and I visualized over and over and over again what was going to happen.
Right.
I visualized, you know what I mean, it being one and done. You know what I mean? I visualized back in June. It was crazy how this played out because so back in June, went against Branden Rhodes, and what they do is like the higher ranked guy is in red corner, which we wear black uniform, and then the lower ranked guy is the blue.
Okay.
So I didn't know that in June because I kind of just started doing that thing. Well, before we ever went out in June, I was doing the visualization stuff, and I kept visualizing myself knocking somebody down in blue.
Yep.
I did just over and over and over again. Well, it was weird that we get to fight week, you know what I mean? We get to go get all of our gear stuff, and I'm in black. So I knew with me being in black, he was in blue. So instantly in my head, I was like, I've already visualized this.
Yep.
I've seen how this, I've seen how this plays out. So, and then, you know what I mean? Things had played out a lot like how I had visualized. I see myself dropping him. I dropped, dropped him twice.
Yep.
How it played out. So when it came into the, to the title fight, it was the same thing. I did all that visualization. I seen myself, I literally watched myself, my technique, making contact with them, watching them drop off to their right, just very vividly, the things that I was going to do after I won the title, my celebration, the things that you're going to say on the microphone, stuff like that. I had all that stuff already planned out in my head because, I had that confidence in myself, and I was, I feel like I had the right mindset going into these things. And like we've said, it's easy to let your mind slip away, but you have to be the one to control all that. And I feel like I had very good control of that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people look at the manifestation or visualize, it's like, it's so woo-woo, it's so like, the thing that you did though.
People look at it as weird.
Right, but the thing that you did is we're really visual people. Like we're visual creatures. Like and you gave yourself a focus. And I would argue that you ended up being more deliberate and detailed with the way that you trained. And then when you were in the situation, you were more composed because you already mentally put yourself there. Like the neural pathways in your mind were already built. And so when you're in that moment and you see blue, you're like, here we go.
I knew it.
Like it's like this comfortability, which people don't understand with high performance. One of the things that throws people out the most is emotional composure. When you get thrown off your rocker, right? And so when you are in that and you're going, yep, blue, yep, this, it's
Yep.
like I'm composed,
It's
man.
coming all
I'm
together.
here.
Yep.
Exactly.
It's coming together like
Yeah.
exactly how I'd visualized. And there's been, you know what I mean? Like I said, people might think it's weird to talk about or whatever, but I had so many signs, you know what I mean, of things where, you know what I mean, or like we competed at the Fountain Blue. There would just be weird things where I was in Vegas a couple weeks before our fight, right? And I'm flying out, and the last building that I catch a view of is the Fountain Blue.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or you know what I mean? There's just these little things where I'm like, maybe this is a sign, or you know what I mean? Things like that, to where I firmly believe in all of that. And now that it's as literally as played out for me, and I've watched it play out, it makes you believe even more.
100%.
It's just, like I said, those signs are, there was times where I'd get on TikTok at night for a few minutes. You know what I mean? One of the first things I would see is a person who sits on a rooftop, close to these hotels, and he's scanning back and forth. And one of the two hotels they keep showing, is the Fountain Blue.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that was just, I would open my phone, open TikTok, and that's the first thing I would see is that guy's live.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? One of the first things I see is Fountain Blue. So it was like, maybe it didn't mean anything, but
the thing is that it meant something to you, and it kept driving you. That's what matters.
Exactly.
That's where people get hung up on it, but that's the thing that mattered, because you gave yourself focuses that kept leveraging your psychology to bring your best performance, and to keep driving your training.
And then I also kept seeing things like motivational things. Like I would be scrolling through Facebook, and I kept seeing this one come up constantly. It says, "You're about to achieve everything you've been praying for." So when I would, you know what I mean? When you see things like those, and you're, you know what I mean? Like literally 2 days before the match, or, you know what I mean? Or on fight week, and I've got a few minutes, I'm scrolling through my phone. When you see those kinds of things, you know what I mean? To me, I take them as signs, and it gives me even more confidence, because I'm like, you know what? Like this is a sign. This is what I visualized. And then when it plays out, you know what I mean? How you visualized and everything else, it just gives you that much more confidence in the situation. So then the next time around, you know what I mean? You really know how to handle these situations. You see these signs and everything. You're like, yep, okay, I know what's going on, because I've been through this. I've done this already. You know what I mean? My mind is set to where, you know what I mean? It's familiar with these things that are happening, because I've taken them all as signs, this first couple times around.
I love it, man. I love it. I was thinking as you were talking too, I wanted to dive into little back. Like I was connected with somebody who is and this might be coming out of left field, but a chronic pain doctor, right? And when I think of getting slapped, like again, my son, when he pops me a good one, I'm like, whoa.
You
dude.
feel it. Yeah, you feel it even when little kids get I do it with my kids too.
Yeah, and you're like, whoa, dang, man. Yeah, come
or
on,
I've got like pads and stuff at home, or like these heads and stuff, and they hit them. I'm like, ooh, jeez.
But she was the work, and I don't want to give away, because I connected the dots. She did not connect these dots. But she talked about how we have like the pain receptors, right? And that we can teach ourselves to not give that pain receptor attention, and it literally dies. Right. And so I'm like, ooh. And so I've found things in my life that, like, physical things where I'm like, nope, not going to focus on it. Right. I've worked with athletes where there is a soreness, and I'm like, okay, every time you walk through a door, because we walk through doors all the time, tell yourself that your knee feels healthy and strong. Right. And then a week later, like, coach, I'm not even thinking about it anymore, right?
Because when you're fixated on that one thing all the time, so like, where your mind goes.
So as you're preparing and things like that, you're going to get hit. There's a feeling. Is there a sense of you, like, not, I would say, put value or not giving attention and trying to shift your attention from that pain as quick as possible to help you absorb that and move on?
Yeah, I think it's just, I think part of not feeling the pain is also like you have a lot of adrenaline going too at the moment. You know what I mean? So, you feel a little bit like after, you get to the back, or your adrenaline starts wearing off, or the next day you kind of feel headache and stuff a little more. But, you know what I mean? It is important to be able to, when you are standing there, okay, so if you've been through a couple matches, like my first couple were a few 3-round wars.
Right.
So you get through those, and like I said, like the next day you have a little bit of a headache and stuff. And, so then when the next one, when you go up there to get hit, and you're going to get hit, and you have to put your hands behind your back to do it again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just to me, it's almost, I don't know, is it proven to myself that it can do these things?
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? It's not only proven to myself, but I'm, proven to the world and everything too. Or, or if it's, how am I going to take this shot? Or, you know what I mean? I think I kind of came into power slap, and you're always worried about I was always worried about getting knocked out. You know what I mean? Because I kind of have, I don't want to say a fear or a phobia, but nobody wants to get knocked
For
out.
sure,
Nobody
yeah,
wants to know what that feels like or
For
anything.
sure.
And luckily I haven't felt any of that yet, but you know what I mean? That's also something you have to get past too.
Yeah.
Being in a sport like this is it's, you know, but if you sit there and fixate on it, like you were just saying, if you sit there and fixate on it, your mind's going to go to a completely different place. So, you know, I've gotten the confidence in my chin, everything. I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of. You know what I mean? I also know that, you know, any person can be knocked out with a perfect shot. You know what I mean?
Some humility there too.
Yep. But at the same time, I also, you know, like I said, I have the confidence in my chin, you know what I mean, now to where I'm like, you know what I mean, I know I'm going to take this shot, or I know that somebody's not going to be able to put me out on their first shot, you know what I mean? And to me, in order to beat me, it's going to have to be a collective damage. You're going to have to, you know, collectively damage me, and you're going to have to take me into the late rounds and hope you can, you know, catch me or finish me or something like that. But I'm in that position now because I've gained the confidence, you know what I mean, over the last 6 matches that I've done.
Work too,
right? But when you first come into this, you don't know until you know.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. Like my first matches, when I came into this, I was like, you know, yeah, I'll be able to take a shot, no problem, and everything, you know. Or my mindset is if somebody's going to stand there with their hands behind their back, I'm going to knock them out with absolutely no problem every time.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Just the lack of perspective and knowing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then the first time you go up there, and I think in my first match, did I win? I don't remember if I won the toss or he won the toss. But either way, though, you know, even when I went to hit him, I was like, I'm going to put this dude out in one shot. So when you hit that guy and then they're still standing there looking at you, your mind instantly goes like, oh shit, okay. You know what I mean? This isn't going to be, you know what I mean? This isn't just, I'm going to touch you, you're going to go out. You know what I mean? That, you know, in my first matches, you know what I mean? So it was, you know, now I have to refocus in for one, I know I have to get hit and I got to take this shot. You know what I mean? So that was another thing too, is like, I didn't know, as a man or as a person, you have confidence, you carry yourself with confidence, you know, and I walked into that, you know, that match confident that I could take a shot. But when it comes to this, you don't know until you know.
100%.
You know what I mean? So once I took that first shot, and the first guy I went against, you know, he's a pretty tough guy. So once I ended up taking that first shot, now I got that confidence in myself. I'm like, okay, I know I can do this now. You know, now it's game on.
Yeah. And now it fuels it. And I think that's the thing that so many people shy away from is like, it is very easy to say, oh, I can do that. I can take that. It's very easy to visualize, oh yeah, if I did this, and right? And then walk away and feel okay about yourself. But to really put yourself in that situation, get popped and go, oh man, I am, or I can do this, or holy crap, I can't. Now what do I think of myself? Like that's the thing that people avoid all the time.
And that mindset is so important, and it's so important even in the back. You know what I mean? Because like I said earlier, I got to go over and coach, you know, over in Saudi Arabia. So I got to kind of see the game from a different angle. Whereas, okay, so I spend a whole week with all of these, you know, these people who are on the card and everything. And, you know what I mean? So I kind of get to know them as people and kind of how they're moving and, you know, but then you get into that locker room and they're getting ready to go out for a match and you can kind of see it. You can see the, I don't know whether it's emotion or whatever it is, flipping these, you know, flipping people, whether they're going out there intense or, you know, what I'd seen in a lot of people was like a blank, like a, holy shit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
What did I just do?
You know what I mean? Or some of these guys only have, you know what I mean? Maybe they only have 2 or 3 matches, you know what I mean? So they're still really getting comfortable and familiar with things. But, you know what I mean? There's a couple people when they're in the locker room warming up and I'm watching them because I'm always watching things too. I'm watching them warm up and I can kind of see in their face. I'm like, they're like a completely different person right now. They're like, you know what I mean?
The eyes tell you everything.
Exactly. You know what I mean? You can see it in their face or you can see it in their eyes, whether they're really ready or whether they're kind of shitting their pants going into it. You know what I mean? And I've been able to see both of it. So, you know, now with myself, I've gotten extremely comfortable in these situations, you know what I mean? Coming out, being in front of the crowd, being in front of the, you know, in front of the bright lights. And then, like I said, I think my experiences and the things that I went through helped me being able to do these things. Like we talk about, some people get under bright lights and they completely fold. You know, well, I even came out in December. We were the co-main event, and there was something about, like, I tell some people, some of these new people, you know what I mean? Because some of them will go, they come in on the show and there's no crowd, or their first match or two is a pre-recorded match where there's no crowd, and now all of a sudden they're in a crowd, you know, in a prelim, and then there's a crowd stuff. So if you don't know how to embrace the energy from the crowd, you got to try to block it out. You know, and if you're the type of person, you got to, you know, really get to know who you are as yourself as a person. If you're the type of person who's shy or you shy away from those things, well, you really have to learn to block those things out. Well, I've found out with myself that it's good for me to embrace all of it.
Sure.
It's good for me to embrace the crowd. I embrace the energy. I pull the energy from the crowd. So you can see it when I go to walk out. Well, the minute I turn the corner and I come out, I'm looking out in the crowd. You know what I mean? I just feel this. I'm just pulling in the energy, seeing everybody staring in at you and all the bright lights that are right in front of your face. You know what I mean? I get a big old smile on my face. I'll get goosebumps. And, you know what I mean? I really embrace that energy. And then you get up there, you know, and I try to bring the crowd into it the whole time. And I remember on this last one, I was pacing back and forth, and they were getting ready to announce stuff, and I had pointed at my arm, and I wish I put it a little bit closer to the camera, but I had goosebumps. Is what I was, you know, that's what I was showing the camera. I was like pointing at my arm, but it was because I had goosebumps.
Can I ask you this? How many times when you were visualizing did you get those goosebumps?
A lot. Dude, it's weird because, and I don't want to sound like a sissy or anything, but there'd be times where I was visualizing things, or I'd be driving home from the gym, and I would like visualize things, and I'd almost start getting emotional. And I'd start crying.
Yeah, you draw the emotion.
Weird, dude. And like there was this time in Saudi Arabia, I woke up one of the mornings, and I was just, it was very thankful and everything for the things that I'm going to experience and go through and whatnot, but I was just emotional. You know what I mean? Visualizing things and getting this emotion, and I'm just like, you know, it was all weird to me.
I think all that matters in visualizing too. And I would say what you described there was you visualized to the point that it gave you goosebumps. Like that's a physiological response. Physical. And then you train, so your mind is focused, like, and then you were able to capture that same thing during the match, during the fight. And that's the piece that people just don't understand. And when you talked about earlier, like you remember wrestlers that couldn't bridge the gap between practice and competing. Well, that's a critical way of bridging that gap. Like you trained yourself to the point that you have that same physiological response and psychological focus. And then it happened. And again, you're comfortable. You're there. You've been there before.
You're comfortable with all of it. And now that I've been through it, you know, physically and not just visually, you know what I mean? Now it's really given me, you know, that confidence in it. And now I also know what to do for future matches, you know what I mean? Or any future situations moving forward. You know what I mean? I do know how important it is to keep yourself in the right mental space. You know what I mean? We talked about earlier, the self-talk, you know what I mean? The visualizing things, the carrying the confidence in things. You know, you can't go into any situation in life, not just sports, but any situation in life and not carry confidence.
For sure.
You know what I mean? If you're not confident going into a situation, what are the chances that you're going to, you know, perform well or whatever it may be?
Especially in a performance space.
You know, exactly. You know, it's not going to be. You know, it's very important to be able to, you know, control those things between your ears. There was this book, I can't remember what the name of it, when I was in high school. There was a couple people who had read it, and it was all based on like your mind. You know, and you know, I was a little too young then to really kind of understand the mental aspect of things, but it's crazy when you sit down and think about it, and when you go through it, when you've been through the things, to really realize, you know what I mean? Like the mental game, to me, the mental game is far more important than the physical game. You know, they both play a huge factor into things.
Well, especially when
the mental game is so big.
In athletics, when you get postseason, it's more mental than physical. And I, you know, obviously have never competed as a world champion, but you've experienced it where, you know, maybe in the beginning you beat a lot of people because you were bigger, faster, stronger, things like that. But as it got to that point where you're competing for a title, you're competing for that belt, it was way more mental.
It's way more mental. And that's, you know, I mean, I'm not going to go too far into depth because I don't know if me and that guy are going to have another match. But I also know 100% that I was in his head very mentally. You know what I mean? And there's also a game within the game that you need to be able to play. You know, and I knew that there were certain things that I would do or certain things that I would say that would throw him off from his game. And I did it many, many, many different times over those couple months. You know what I mean? He had to not only deal with me, but hear me or hear what I had to say pretty much daily, you know what I mean, on social media or whatever it is, you know, and it was because I knew I kind of got to know him as a person, you know, a little bit, and I kind of know how he ticks a little bit. So there was certain situations where I knew if I said this or I did that, that's going to throw them off mentally or, you know what I mean? There was, and it definitely worked. I know. So there's this one instance, the morning of the match, Isaiah has this routine that he likes to do for himself, right? Well, when you throw somebody off their routine, it throws them off, right? So he does this thing where he wants to pray with every person that he goes against. In December, he got me with it because I didn't know. I didn't know he did this with each person. Well, I had talked to a couple other people that he had went against in the past. Actually, leading into the March match, I was just messaging with one of the guys, and they said, "Hey, by the way, if he wants to pray with you, don't, really think about doing that. And so I sat back for a second. So I asked him, I was like, would he do that with you too? He's like, yeah. So I'm like, okay, I know how this goes. I said, because if that's part of your routine and you do that every single time, now if that routine is broke, I know it's going to throw you off mentally. So what does he do? Friday morning, he texts me and says, hey, can we say a prayer together real quick? And I said, my exact words to him were, no, I know this is your routine. And I said, I'm here to be the one to break your routine. And I know for a fact, because I also talked to a couple other people that I talked to him, that it made his mind spiral.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I wasn't trying to be a I wasn't trying to be an asshole. You know what I mean?
But you're competing at that
exactly.
point.
I'm competing against him at that point. So I got to do whatever I got to do to put myself in that advantage, right? And I feel like him being in his routine all the time puts him at his advantage, right? So whatever I got to do to break that routine to give myself that advantage, and that's exactly what I did.
Man. Yeah, and I think for that too, like to understand having routines is important, but don't make them where without them you can't still get into the right headspace.
Right. You need to be able to control yourself because not everything's going to go perfect. And I've also noticed that as well with everything. You know what I mean? Not everything's going to go perfect. And when it doesn't, or when something messes up, that's when you got to be able to get control of yourself or be able to get control of your mind or adapt to the situation. Exactly. And there's people out there who cannot do that. And that's another thing that I've learned is, yes, to adapt to the situation, or, okay, yes, I visualize this and this is exactly how I want it to play out. Now I know in my head that it's not all going to play out like that. Right. That's a good thing to have in your mind. Like, yes, I want it to play out like this, but I also got to keep in my head that, along the way, there's going to be things that aren't going to go exactly how I want them to go, and I have to be able to navigate around those things. You know what I mean? There's many different things that happen just in everyday life, where you have to navigate around those situations. And I've been able to teach myself, just with everything that I've dealt with or gone through or whatever it is, I've been able to teach myself to be able to do that.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So what's next for you, man? Like, you're world champion. What are the next dreams? Like, what's the next thing?
Yeah, so now it turns into, defending, what I mean? And I looked and, there's right now we got Damien DeBell, who's a heavyweight, kind of in my opinion, he's the pound per pound #1 right now.
Yeah.
I think he's defended his title 3 or 4 times, so that's kind of the record right
now. He's a young guy, right?
Yeah,
he's
guy
out of Florida or something like that.
23 or 24, something like that. He's going to school to be a lawyer.
I read that.
So I mean, he's an animal up there for sure. He had a tough match in December. That was kind of the first time we've seen him tested. But both of those guys, he went against Dorian Perez, and Dorian is absolutely as tough as they come. To watch those guys. But now I've kind of sat back and I've seen, okay, well, he's defended his title. I want to say 3 times. He'll be going into his 4th defense. So now I'm chasing his defense. Every time now he defends it, he's setting that record even farther. So I mean, whether he keeps going or somebody ends up getting him, whether he's got 3, 4, 5 defenses now, my attention shifted on. I want to break that record.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go for the title defense record. I'd like to clear out my division.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I don't know if sometimes you see these guys that they'll win a title and the first thing they want to do is, I want to go up to the next division.
Yeah.
You can't do that. You know what I mean? You're in your division. If you clear out your division, then I completely understand. But my mindset is, and I want to create a respectable legacy.
Yep.
Well, in order to do that, I feel like you need to have the next best guy every time.
Sure.
And that's what I said on the microphone that night too.
Yep.
Whether it's a trilogy with Isaiah or whether it's New Blood, I want the next best person every time because I want to beat, you know what I mean? I want to beat that next person. I'm the best person in our division, right? And now I want the next best guy every time because I want to beat the best guy every time.
Man. It's the best look in the mirror.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And then if it's, you know what I mean, I clear out the division and I'm still going, whether it's, moving up a division and chasing after a second title simultaneously. I don't know if that's anything Power Step will necessarily let happen. I know the UFC they had let it happen a few times, but they've also been kind of veering away from it. It does hold up other divisions and stuff, so I don't know, you know what I mean? So something like that, but I know, like I said, I'm definitely chasing the title defense record. You know what I mean? I'd like to clear out my division. I'd like to defend this thing, 4, 5, 6 times, whatever it turns out to be. I just signed a new 6-fight contract.
Right on.
So whether, you know what I mean, whether I get through those, 6 defenses and kind of see where we're at from there, so I'm excited to see, where things have gone, just the growth of Power Slap in general from, where it started to where it is now. And, You know, I mean, there was an interview with Dana not very long ago where he said, you know, I mean, I told you guys 2 years ago, wait to see what power slap is right now, and now look. And he said, I'm telling you right now, wait and see what power slap is in 2 more years. You know, so to me, it's intriguing because this is literally, it's building so big, you know, event by event even.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So to see where all this is going to be in the next couple of years, you know, is extremely intriguing to me. You know what I mean? I'm happy to, you know, be at the top of the game and be one of the, you know, one of the faces of the sport. And, you know what I mean? I carry that responsibility, and you know, I mean, you know, I keep that on my shoulders, and I want to do a lot of the right things, right? I try to carry myself the right way. I try to do the right things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I know you've seen it in other sports where somebody goes and wins something big, and then they totally unwind or they go off the rails.
Well, they end up not being the guy that they said they were.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, okay, I see. That changed you.
Yeah, that things change them, or they you know, they let, you know, winning a world title or some money or some attention or whatever it is, they let them change them, you know, who they are as a person. That's another thing I said coming into all of this is no matter what happens, no matter how many world titles I win, no matter how much money I make, no matter how much attention you get out of this, I'll never change who I am as a person. Never. I'll never change down to the core. And, you know, I've watched the MMA game very closely. You know what I mean? I've watched professional sports very closely in general. I've seen a lot of people get to the top and they change completely who they are. Or they let fame change them, or they let money change them, you know what I mean? Or something like that. So, you know, I've always vowed to, if these situations ever came up for me, that I would never let them change me as a person. You know, and I think that's very important to be able to carry yourself, you know what I mean, carry yourself the right way and keep yourself involved in the right things and keep yourself involved in the community and like with my coaching and coaching, you know, the kids and stuff like that. I think that's huge where, you know, I mean, you have people, other champions or people who have been champions running around acting like idiots, or, you know what I mean, or they're running around drinking and partying and, you know, trying to have fun and trying to, you know, live that life. And I feel like, you know, this power slap with other, you know, other sports as well, I feel like some people try to get into it for the wrong reasons as well. You know what I mean? I feel like some people are just chasing the wrong things. You know what I mean? You're getting into a combat sport where if your focus really isn't right and it's not on the right things, excuse me, you can get hurt. You know what I mean? So if you're trying to get into this and you just want attention off from it, or you want to, you know, build a little bit of fame or something like that, to me, that's stupid. You know what I mean? I you know, cool, the attention, whatever the, you know, stuff that comes with that, that's cool and all. But my number one goal coming in all this was stacking world titles. You know what I mean? I want to win world titles, and I obviously want to make a bunch of money to take care of my family. You know what I mean? That's where my focus is. My focus is on winning, you know, winning world titles, and now seeing how many I can win. You know what I mean? I've gotten myself to the pinnacle of the sport. You know what I mean? Now I'm the world champion. Now I'm going to compete not just only against others, but I'm going to compete against myself and see how far I can take these things. You know what I mean? I keep setting the goal, you know, keep pushing the goalpost farther. Right? Once you get there, and I've also seen it with other things too, you know, you get to the goalpost, you know what I mean? If you don't push that goalpost farther and set other goals, well, now what are you working for? Right? So if I just sat here and been like, oh, I'm world champion, you know, cool. You know what I mean? If I didn't push the goalpost farther, I'm not going to get any better. And the chances are in my next match, or whether in the next couple matches, somebody's going to end up getting you. You know what I mean? Because your focus isn't right. You're not driven. You know what I mean? You're not as dedicated as what you're supposed to be. I've said when I won this title, I said, the work starts now. You know what I mean? I put in a shitload of work, and I really do work my ass off in this. But I think now that when you have the title, now is when the real work starts. You know what I mean? Everybody's chasing you. Everybody wants what you have.
You're the hunted now.
Exactly. And like I said, when we walked in here was, you know what I mean? I feel like I have a good gap on this competition. Whereas if I don't keep grinding the way that I grind, I feel like that gives them the ability to close that gap on me. So now I'm using that, you know, myself having gap on the competition as, you know, a confidence, and, you know, and I'm pushing that towards my work ethic too. Now every day, you know what I mean? We're just going to keep pushing, keep making yourself better. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to give them time to catch up. You know what I mean? I've gotten myself set to a certain point, and I want to keep pushing that as far as I can. And I think it's me, not only, like I said, not only is it me competing against others, now it's also me competing against myself. And that's another thing I really like about the gym and stuff too, is when you go into the gym is you're competing against yourself, right?
Every time.
When you're, you know what I mean, you get down to those last couple reps and they're hard as can be, and your mind's telling you, no, screw this, put it down. You got to fight your mind and tell you, no, I'm not. I'm going to push through this. And when you push through those moments and you get through those last couple reps, you get through them and then you put it down, you're like, I knew I could do it. Now I just trained my mind to really know, you know what I mean? Yes, I was telling myself, but now I know for a fact that I just trained my mind that I can, you know, I can get those last couple. And now you need to do that every time. You know what I mean? Keep pushing yourself, keep training yourself like that, keep training your mind. And it was, You know, like I said, I'm so competitive, whether it's against myself or whether against others. I've messed around and said, like, I don't care if we're thumb wrestling.
You're
I don't
right.
care if we're racing.
I'm
You know
gonna
what I
win.
mean? You
I'm
know,
gonna
yeah,
beat
right. I
you.
don't care
Yeah,
if we're
let's go.
racing to the wall and back, or you know
Yep.
what I mean, or if it's Monopoly.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. And I've been like that my whole life with like competitiveness.
Yeah.
I've always been extremely competitive, and I think it's something I've said with this too. Like, I think I'm successful and I'm able to do the things that I've done because, yes, I love winning. I love winning almost more than anything, but even more is I hate losing.
Yeah.
I hate losing more than I love winning even.
Yeah, man.
So I think I carry that just within everything in life.
Yep.
I mean, it's not just sports or profession or whatever it is. It's in my everyday life. I think I feel like I carry that same exact thing.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, it's exciting, you know, seeing you being a West Michigan guy,
Yeah.
like here in West Michigan.
Coming
I think
from
it's
this area.
yeah, like I think it's really cool for the kids too. You're still
Yeah.
involved in the community, and
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of you like at the wrestling club, like kids
Yeah,
holding the
the
thing.
little
I think it's
belt and
great
everything.
because you know, being in West Michigan, being in a small town, which is great to grow up in, I'm sure for these kids, but a lot of times they don't have those examples, man.
No.
And so it's great that not only are you willing to be that example and go chase this thing down, but you're bringing it back.
Yep.
And it's super cool to see too. Like you're at a time where you're setting standards.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
setting the bar, man.
It's so important to me because, especially when it comes to the kids and stuff, I get really excited about that because I remember being those kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I remember looking up to all these athletes. I remember very, very, very vividly. I think we were only 10, 11, 12 years old. East Grand Rapids was on like a run where they're winning state titles almost every year. Well, they had a running back, Kevin Grady Jr. He was so good. Well, I remember going down. That was when the Lions were still even in the Silver Dome, so it was so long
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
But I very vividly remember being that kid. You know, I mean, I looked up to him so much, and there was times where in between the games, the team that's usually playing next, they'll come out for a little bit. While me and my buddies, we took like just the tickets. We ran over to him and had him sign autographs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I remember being that kid. And now that I'm in that position where kids look up to me, I want to make sure, you know what I mean, I'm handling myself, you know, the right way all the time. And it's extremely important to me to be able to, you know, when you're coaching kids or, you know, before I was in the power step, before I was competing myself, you know what I mean? I'm coaching these kids with my words, right?
Yep.
And yeah, they are listening to your words and whatnot, but now I'm not just coaching with my words, but I'm coaching with my actions.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So they're not only hearing what I'm telling them or what I'm teaching with my words, but now they're watching how I'm handling myself and how I'm doing things. And that was another important thing of December 6th when that, you know, that stoppage happened like it did.
Yep.
I could have, you know, acted like a complete idiot. You know what I mean?
100%,
I could have
man.
made a fool out of myself. I could have made a
100%.
million excuses and everything.
Yep.
But one of the first things that came to my mind was not only my own children are watching me,
Yep.
but I have so many other kids that are watching me. And if I don't handle myself right in this situation, well, now these kids can think, oh, well, okay, so if I get in a situation where I lose or
Right.
I get into a situation that, you know what I mean, it's
Whatever, the ref made the bad call.
right.
whatever it
You
is.
know, if
Yeah,
I get in
yeah.
one of those situations, now I can handle myself like Coach did because he did it and it's okay.
100%.
You know what I mean? I think a lot of these guys or a lot of these people really realize that, you know what I mean, there's kids or, you know what I mean, the people that, even adults, there's other adults that are watching you too. And when you handle yourself in a certain situation, you know what I mean, if you're handling yourself negatively, now they look at it and they'll be like, oh, well, if he can do it, you know what I mean, I can do it. I don't want it to be like that. I want it to be like, and I've also said this, I want it to be like, if I can do these things and I can achieve these things, then so can you.
100%.
You know what I mean? I at the end of the day, I'm just a person, you know, like you are. Like, yeah, you know, I've been through things. I've trained my mind. I've trained my body, you know what I mean, to get to these things, you know, to where I'm at. But you can do those same exact things. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I'm, you know what I mean, I'm just a person, you know. So it's very cool for me to be in this position where, you know, kids can look up to you, people can look up to you. And that's why it's so important for me to stay involved in the community, stay involved in coaching, you know what I mean? Actually, even more now than before,
Right.
because I do have, you know what I mean, that impact on me where the kids can look at you, you know what I mean? Like I said, not just listen to your words, but they can watch your actions. You know, they're watching how, you know, how I prepare. They're watching how you compete. They watch how you handle yourself before the match, in the match, after the match. You know what I mean? There's, you know, they're always watching. You know what I mean? And if they're not watching, then my 4 kids are always watching.
For sure. Yeah.
Always watching.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like I will be. I've said this a few times. Like the twins have Alexas. And, you know, we don't give them to them all the time, but once in a while we'll let them have their Alexas. Well, it's funny because I'll hear them from the other room and they'll be like, hey, Alexa, play my dad's Power Slap on YouTube. And it's funny. I'll be like, baby, they don't know who your dad is. So they'll say, Alexa, play Branden the Butcher Bordeaux Power Slap on YouTube.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So just to see them sit there and then they'll sit there and watch the matches. Or I've had a few different times where, you know what I mean, I've looked outside and I've seen them holding my pads and they're all sitting there, they're sitting there slapping them, you know, themselves. Or actually, we were just on vacation and I had one of my heads with us and I had one of the paddles with us, and I walked into the room and the twins are sitting there with a paddle, sitting there smacking it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So though it's just the fact of they're always watching, whether, like I said, whether it's your own kids or whether it's, you know, somebody else's kids or kids you're coaching, you know what I mean? They're always watching. So it's very important to handle yourself, you know, with class, you know, win or lose with class. That's another thing my dad has said, you know, growing up our whole life, is you win and lose with class and you handle yourself like that in every situation. So that was another thing with all of this, is I feel like, you know, I mean, I was always destined to do something, you know, special.
Yeah,
and
man.
actually it was really cool because, you know, this power step journey it's done a lot of very good things for a lot of people that, you know, the normal person doesn't understand unless you're hearing more of our stories and stuff. But, you know what I mean? This has brought, you know, my family closer together. You know, me and my dad and his brother didn't talk to each other for, I think, 6 or 7 years. Well, they just recently rekindled their relationship, and they both were out in Vegas to support me for this.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I had a falling out with my best friend in high school, and him and I have kind of been brought back together.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because of this whole situation. His parents were actually, who I haven't seen in 10, 12 years, flew out to Vegas, you know what I mean, to be out there with me, to compete with me. So, you know, not to compete with me, but be out there to support me, you know. And his dad had actually told me then, he said, you know, I always knew from a kid that you were going to do something special.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I was like, I really appreciate hearing that. But I wanted to be, and this is another thing where I think everything happens for a reason too. I wanted to have the things I have now and doing the things that I'm doing now in my early 20s.
Yeah.
But I firmly believe that everything happens for a reason, right? And I think the reason why I didn't achieve the things that I'm achieving now then was because I wasn't mature enough.
Right.
I wasn't ready. You know what I mean? Whether it comes to, you know, the physical aspects or the mental aspects or being able to manage money, or, you know what I mean? Or
it would have changed you.
Or it would have just, I think back then it would have changed me. You know what I mean? It would have went to my head. It would have been a little bit different, to whereas, you know, that's why I firmly believe that everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? God has a plan for everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you know, that plan's already laid out, and you just got to, you know, you got to play it.
Yeah,
and
man.
you know, for me to be able to experience those types of things, you know what I mean? It's been absolutely crazy.
Yeah, dude. Well, I appreciate you jumping on the podcast, man. This has been great. We're going to keep supporting you, man.
Yeah,
we want to keep, we believe greatness is within everybody, and you're chasing it down, dude. And we want to keep seeing you chase it down. And it's exciting.
Yeah. It's something that, you know what I mean, everybody has in them, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be in a sport, you know what I mean? It could be, you know, and you're just in your everyday life.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You can't get down on yourself, you know? I mean, and like I said earlier, I think self-talk is probably one of the absolute big, I mean, you could probably tell me more than that, but I think self-talk is a huge thing.
It's huge, yeah.
You know what I mean? If you get in situations, you got to be able to talk yourself through them and work yourself through them. And, you know what I mean? The mind control over everything.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like I said, you could wake up and you could be in a bad, you know what I mean, a bad mood or not feel good, and you can let that dictate your entire day.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean, you can try to pull yourself out of those situations, you know what I mean, mentally work yourself through those situations and make it better.
Yeah, and I would just say, for people watching, we'll end with this, is like, that not only is it important, but understanding that the words you're speaking now is building your kid's self-talk.
Yep.
And the self-talk that is anchored in, and that I caught, that your dad said, you're gonna win and lose with class.
Yep.
And that's what you're doing, man.
Yep.
And that's part of that self-talk, man. It's so important. So
Yep.
we'll definitely have to do this again, dude.
Yeah, sure.
And we're gonna keep seeing you chase this thing down, man.
Yeah.
Set some standards.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.